Good afternoon. I'm Brandon Kamerman. We're here for our Tider Insider post-practice update. I'm with Rodney Orr of TiderInsider.com. We'll be doing this all fall camp after each practice, kind of breaking down what we saw. This was the first practice of fall camp, and obviously a lot to take in the first practice. And, you know, they were just in helmets and shorts today, kind of just getting used to things, bringing in some of these new guys. But let's start, Rodney, with just your overall impressions. What stood out to you today in the short period we got to see a fall practice?
And you're right, Brandon. We need to point that out. Short period, very short. I mean, it was maybe 10 minutes at the most. So very difficult to get a lot of observations. But I would say this. The first thing you always want to look at is how does this team look on the hoof physically? You know, they're in shorts and helmets only, so there's no contact or anything like that. They're going through basic drills. But when you look on the hoof, the first group you see are those outside linebackers. Wow, extremely impressive. That is even without Terrell Lewis. I mean, Lewis is out, Anthony Jennings, Christian Miller, Chris Allen, a young player that's going to be outstanding. But those freshmen, I mean, when you look at Cameron Latu, Ayabi Anoma, Jerez Parks, who was here, went through spring practice, but is actually gray-shirted last year, so he is a freshman this year. Very impressive physically. I think when you look at those guys, that's the thing that jumped out at me first when you walk in the gate. And then you move on to the defensive linemen. I think obviously you've got Raekwon Davis, Isaiah Buggs, Quentin Williams. All three of those guys look to be outstanding. Now, the guy that really jumped out at me was number 89, LeBron Ray. He's gotten bigger. He looks a lot better than he did, obviously, as a true freshman. He's had a little bit of opportunity to go through. Now, as a sophomore, he's developed some. So, again, I think those are some of the things when you first walk through the gate that really jump out at you.
You're talking about defensive line, defense overall. Obviously, the new defensive coordinator is Tosh Lupoi, very familiar with the program, of course, and he was still coaching the outside linebackers. Really, to me, looked like the same old Tosh, even though he has a different role. Did you see anything different from Tosh?
No, I really didn't. In fact, you know, Tosh is always very vocal, relates really well to the players, I think, and was coaching extremely hard. So I thought it was basically the same Tosh Lupoi in terms of coaching the outside linebackers. Did watch the inside linebackers as well. Pete Golding, the new inside backers coach, and you know, obviously he was doing an excellent job of getting those guys directed, and a lot of new faces there. Not much depth, as we've talked about in the past, Brandon.
You had talked about some of the new guys. I want to stick with Ayabi Anoma. I think he's a guy a lot of fans are paying close attention to provide maybe even some immediate depth on that defensive line. You think he has a chance to play this year?
Well, I mean, you look at a guy like that with his athletic ability. You know, he's long, he's lean. You can see he's going to add weight. He's going to get bigger. Very athletic-looking guy. Great first step. I think it's going to probably be tough not to play him some this year. You know, how much kind of depends on him and how he develops. Really impressed with Cameron Latu, physically. I mean, he's thick, he's tall, he's got good height as well, like Ayabi does, and really impressed with him. And I mentioned Jerez Parks too. On the inside, Brandon, a lot of people are kind of concerned about the depth issues. We've talked about, obviously, Dylan Moses and Mac Wilson. Those two guys are elite inside linebackers, I think, on the hoof, and as well as they develop, I think they're going to continue to be, you know, really outstanding players. Another guy that kind of jumped out at me with just size alone was the true freshman Jalen Moody. A lot of buzz about him and how he's been performing this summer and kind of the drills that they've done and what have you. Given the lack of depth, I think Jalen Moody, look at him physically, he could earn some time.
We're inside Coleman Coliseum, and commencement is tomorrow in Coleman Coliseum, so we're actually hearing them warm up a little bit behind us. All right, let's switch over to offense a little bit. Obviously, story of fall camp.
Yeah.
What's on a lot of people's mind is that quarterback situation. Did you see anything today that caught your eye?
Well, you know, again, you always like Coach Saban to address the injury situation before, you know, kind of putting stuff out there. But the word is, things that I've heard, is that to his hands 100%. You know, looked at him today. If you watched him, he certainly threw the ball extremely well. Did not get as much of an opportunity to watch Jalen. A little bit Mac Jones, not much, but watching Tua especially because of that hand, he seemed to be really zipping it with a lot of confidence, a lot of velocity, a lot of accuracy. So I thought he looked good just in the opportunities that we got to see him.
We're talking a lot about some of the new guys, too. Obviously not a new guy, but one guy you've talked a lot about on Tider Insider TV and on TiderInsider.com is Jalen Waddell. Now, I want to make it clear, we do get, again, a short period to see what's going on. So did you get a chance to see the young freshman?
No, not much. Zach told me he got a little shot of him running a route, and he told me he looked pretty good. But, you know, I know Jalen Waddell is a guy that a lot of fans, as you mentioned, and I've talked about him obviously considerably on our TV show as well as TiderInsider.com. But Brandon, I think when you're talking about him, he's a guy that I think is going to really push for a lot of playing time as a receiver this year, in spite of the fact that they've got a lot of guys, coming back. The 3 young players that played a lot last year, Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs. I think you're going to see Waddle right in the middle of that. And then I also think he's got a great opportunity in terms of returning punts, kickoffs, and what have you. Now, I might mention this too. A guy that missed spring practice, Terrell Shavers, the redshirt freshman, the guy of the freshman group of receivers last year who redshirted, the only one. He's out there. He was participating today, and when you look at him, he's a totally different look. He's a guy that's about 6'5", 215 pounds, gives you an absolutely different kind of target there to work with. So I thought he looked pretty good as well.
Obviously, we're hoping to see a lot of these guys perform well throughout fall camp, but maybe more than anything, we're just hoping for health. We did see Terrell Lewis walking, out of practice when we were walking in, and obviously has a big knee brace on, but looked to be in pretty good shape. And again, we've said it before, there's a chance he plays this year.
You never know. I mean, last year he made it back, and of course, obviously a different kind of injury. But you mentioned it, Brandon. I thought even though he had the brace on, he seemed to be moving pretty well. And might as well say this, when we're talking about injuries, Anthony Jennings, he was out there looking very good. Number 33 did an outstanding job. Didn't seem to have any ill effects from the injury that he suffered against Clemson, the knee injury. So that was really good to see.
Right, Rodney. Well, that kind of wraps up the first fall practice. But again, we'll be doing this each and every day after each fall practice. You can catch it on WVUA23.com. You can also catch it on TiderInsider.com. We'll post it there each and every day. A lot to review this fall, and we're looking forward to it. So thanks for joining in.